were pioneers too. Like the waka who came before us, we came in search of new lands and new opportunities. We found on this floating land at the end of the ocean a new home, vast and wild. Waheguru created the universe, the world, and every life form. Before the universe, there was only Waheguru. The supreme power established the earth, sky, air, the water of the oceans, fire, and food. The divine power created the moon, the stars, and the sun, night, day, and mountains.
So the earliest migration of Punjabis that we have on record is 1890. A gentleman known as Fuman Singh Gill. He ended up in Wanganui and he married a local Kiwi girl and he settled down in Wanganui. So this is a list of all the immigrants that came to New Zealand from 1890 up to 1940. And it's got photos and the stories of most of our pioneers. So that's my grandfather with some of the people who were his contemporaries who came with him to New Zealand. So he was the pioneer who came to New Zealand in 1920 and basically settled here. And the family followed in 1953. That's when we came to this country. My grandfather stayed in this country off and on about 50 years. The circumstances that prevailed in this country right up to 1950, I would say, were not amenable to bringing up a family. And so the families basically stayed back in India while they worked here in this country. Getting work here in the urban areas was not easy. They did find a lot of discrimination at that time. So the only opportunity they had at that stage was to go out in the outbacks, like the King Country, and there they found opportunities to work as itinerant workers, clearing the bush, cutting the scrub. Because there were people who had come off the land in Punjab, they could easily relate to things of the land. So that experience eventually translated in a lot of them starting to own some of those bush farms, like the one we had when we came later in 1953.
Though our bond with this land was forged 130 years ago, it was more recent events that brought us in numbers. It is a story often endured by immigrant populations of persecution, violence, and voicelessness.
I am the oldest daughter of immigrant parents. My nana was originally born in what is now known as Pakistan, and she was about 10 when the partition happened between Pakistan and India. She saw some of her friends or family members die in front of her eyes, and she lived in a refugee camp for a little bit until they got a plot of land or a place to stay in India. When she was 11, the partition happened and they had to travel, and it was like 23 days it took them. And then to save the honor of women, the family members would kill the woman or chuck them in wells so like that the opposition wouldn't rape them or kill them.
like her dad's sister, a couple of their daughters, like as young as 8 years old, just killed and like chucked into the well and stuff.
Kia ora New Zealand, मैं ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਦੋਸਤ ਤੇ ਹੋਸਟ ਪਰਮਿੰਦਰ। ਅੱਜ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੁਪਹਿਰ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸੇਵਾ 'ਚ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹਾਂ। ਨਿਊਜ਼ੀਲੈਂਡ 'ਚ ਵਸੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚਰਚਾਵਾਂ ਚੱਲਦੀਆਂ ਰਹਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚਰਚਾਵਾਂ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੀ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੇ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਅੰਦਾਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ 24 ਘੰਟੇ 7 ਦਿਨ ਚੱਲਣ ਵਾਲਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸੇਵਾ 'ਚ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਪੇਸ਼ਕਾਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ। I never thought about leaving my motherland, but I have been tortured twice after that 1984 era as a Sikh youth. I was actually on my way to refill the LPG cylinder, and all of a sudden police just stopped me and they didn't ask me anything. They didn't say anything, so they start beating me. They actually beated me without any reason because I was sick. And then second time, they just picked me up from my room in a student hostel. They just blindfolded my eyes and took me to an unknown place and they start beating me. In those days, it's very common. There was no justice system. They can pick up anyone with a turban. I'm 47 now, but I couldn't talk about it even to my kids or my mom or even to my wife. Those are the black days. So how's business? Diwali was good? Oh. Tired, eh? Most of us, we are economic migrant and also belongs to a minority community. You have to start from scratch. And when I came in the country, my first job was in an alloy wheel plant in Viri. But I used to work 12 hours each day. It's like 4 days on, 4 days off. During my 4 days off, I used to drive taxis. Sometimes, after I work as a taxi driver on Saturday night till 5 a.m., just come home, have a shower, and go straight to my next job. It wasn't easy in the beginning.
Upon death, we merge back into the universe. Just as a drop of rain merges back into the ocean. The Gurdwara to us is as the Marae is to the Tangata Whenua. It is a shelter to all who need it, a hot meal to all who are hungry, and a quiet spot in an otherwise noisy world. It is the essence of who we are. It is our meeting place. Our tūranga waiwai.
In the early stages of pioneering, deaths was another challenge. Most people in our faith are cremated, and there weren't many cremations around to serve that. As people got established in their farms, there were incidences where people were actually cremated as per our rituals back in the old country. With a wooden pyre, the bodies are placed on it and then covered with the pyre and then lit up. When the neighbor farms found out a cremation had taken place next door to them, they went to the authorities. In the Waikato, we had quite a few families now. Then the issue of identity also arose. It's in that context that the New Zealand Sikh Society was formed. And then the Gurdwara followed from that.
राग ਧਨਾਸਰੀ ਮਹਲਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਗगन ਮੈਂ ਥਾਲ ਰਾਵ ਚੰਦ ਦੀਪਕ ਬਨੇ ਤਾਰਿਕਾ ਮੰਡਲ ਜਨਕ ਮੋਤੀ ਧੂਪ ਮਨ ਆਨ ਲੋ ਪਵਨ ਚਵਰੋ ਕਰੇ ਸਗਲ ਬਨਰਾਏ ਫੁਲੰਤ ਜੋਤੀ.
In the early 60s, this Waikato was the area where a lot of the Punjabi farmers started congregating. And so in 1969, the section for this place was bought, 5 acres on the road, basically. It did cause quite a commotion in the community, the fact that we had bought on the main road. So it took a while to sort that out. And eventually in 1976, the foundation stone of this place was laid. So this became the center of our community. And this is the place where the community kitchen, the langar as we call it, takes place, which is an integral part of our Sikh religion. Anybody can come and sit in a langar, irrespective of their caste or religion or background. This is a concept that goes back almost 400 years. It started with the founder of our Sikh religion.
Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here. Terrorists. Turban is as much part of our identity as moko is to Māori.
To me, turban is actually my mark of respect, my kaitiaki from generation to generation as a Sikh. It's actually carrying responsibility about my heritage, 13,000 kilometers away from my native village. We are here to maintain our different appearance and still serving the humanity. ਸ਼ੂਗਰ ਦੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਮਰੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੈਸੀਫਿਕ ਆਈਲੈਂਡਰ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ DHB ਯਾਨੀ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਹੈਲਥ ਬੋਰਡ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ statistics ਜਾਂ ਅੰਕੜੇ ਜਾਰੀ ਕੀਤੇ ਸਨ. My roles in the community as a justice of the peace, as a parish celebrant, as a community awareness broadcaster on 104.6 FM and on Radio Spice. And on top of that, since April 2016, I've been nominated by the community as a district advisor to the Commander of Police in Counties Manukau District. I won't be getting this kind of mana in India because I'm from minority community. Back in India, I used to work only with the Indians, but in here, I have to work like hundreds of different ethnic background people. So I have to know their cultural values, their core values. Kia ora. Ko shivalik te maunga. Ko bias te awa. Ko Air India te waka. Ko Dashmesh Darbar te Marae.
I tūtaki a hoki paminda I te taurua mano ngahuru marima. Ana I te whakawhiti kōrero māua e pāna ki te painga o te reo Māori.
Ko Punjabi te iwi. Ko Parminder ahu.
Ka pai anō. Mō te motu whānui, mō ngā tāngata katoa, nā kupea I whakatō te kākano ki roto I aia ki te whai te reo Māori. Kia pai ake pea tōna ao, no reira I te taurua mano ngahuru mā whitu. He kai a koa hau I te wharewananga o Awanui Ārangi, ana ka toro mai a paminda hei tauira I tōku taha, ana ka timata ia ki te aku I te reo. Ko te mea nui pia I roto I taua momo. Ko te kai ngākau o te tangata nei, ki tō tātou ao, aha koa he ini ana, aha koa no ngā motu, no ngā mautere o te ao, I pai mai ia ki tō tātou ao Māori. Nā kona pia I whānui ai tana tirohanga. Ki te ao, o tira kia ngai tātou te iwi Māori.
We, the children of immigrants, are of two worlds now. Our identities forged from two cultures, both and neither.
Growing up for me in New Zealand was quite interesting because I kind of had my foot in two different worlds. I was like a typical Kiwi kid. I did netball, I did swimming, I did tennis, I did bull rush. And then as soon as I went home, I was like this Punjabi kid that was doing Indian classical music and, cooking Indian food with my mum. So I'm making Punjabi cha. So Punjabis and Indians, they love drinking cha. As you know, food is central to us. So it's cha in the morning, they drink cha. In the afternoon, they drink cha. Whenever they get together, they drink cha. It's like a way to bring everyone together. Being a part of two worlds can be quite beautiful, but it can be quite difficult. Your family want you to uphold this culture or these traditions. You feel guilt or shame because you don't think the same way that your parents or your community does. In primary school, I would go with my mum or dad to the bank and I would be the translator between the bank teller and my mum or dad. Kind of feel like you missed out on a childhood a little bit because you had to help out your parents adapt to this new life. Growing up, I listened to a lot of heavy metal and rock, Pantera and Metallica. In high school one time, this Punjabi guy messaged me on Facebook and he's like, "You're that girl that wears band tees on mufti, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then he was like, "Punjabi girls shouldn't be listening to that kind of music because that kind of music is for boys." Because I'm Indian and I'm Sikh, we don't cut our hair. And so I used to have like hairy legs and hairy arms. People would call me a gorilla. Although I had a supportive family, sometimes I felt like I couldn't open up to them because my parents were always busy, they were always working, the typical immigrant parents. And so I felt like I didn't want to burden them with what was going on at school. It was quite destructive for my self-esteem.
From woman, man is born. From woman, woman is born. Without woman, there would be no one at all. So why call her bad? From her, kings were born.
I have been very lucky that I was surrounded by very strong women. I had a very strong community, and we like to joke in our family that it's a matriarchy, not a patriarchy, because they're the shot callers, and even though sometimes their husbands may say one thing, they really taught me how to stand up for myself and, kind of do what I want. Hi, Simran.
Hey.
How's it going? So the caption that I wanted to do was I kind of wanted to talk about, that my auntie, they left sort of when she was about 12, like her dad and her siblings. And so her mum stayed in India by herself and did all of the farming.
Like holding down the fort?
Yeah, really holding down the fort. So she was like a true feminist. I met Simran through a music class and I was wearing a band tee, and she came up to me and she was like, "Oh, you're into Slipknot?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And she's like, "So am I. I've not met another Indian girl that's into Slipknot." We had joined feminist pages on Instagram, but we didn't see any pages that kind of shared the South Asian female perspective. So we started the Indian Feminist. So we use a lot of humour to highlight a lot of the points that we're trying to get across. And we sort of tailor it to explain the South Asian context. Like, for example, this one, "Mum, can I go out?" And then there's that samurai sword and it says yes. And then she pulls it out more and it's like, "Yes, when you're married." So it kind of brings humour to real life issues that some of us have to go through. The dominant narrative in history has kind of always been the white man's voice, and in feminism it was the white woman's voice. although we could relate to some of the feminist issues out there, we couldn't relate in the South Asian context. So, white women were all about free the nipple, but, we were talking about women who were suffering from acid attacks in India. So this post was part of a series as a collaboration with Make Love Not Scars, a NGO in India, and they help out acid attack survivors. They give free counselling and surgery and a place to stay. So this story is to do about Soni. She got married when she was 17 and her in-laws and husband were quite abusive towards her. She wanted to be a police officer and she had already completed her training and was about to receive her gun license. And then her in-laws chucked acid at her. So essentially the patriarchy kind of relies on men being dominant and women being subservient, and we see that a lot in Indian culture, which is why we wanted to start the Indian Feminists, to get conversations going, trying to dismantle or deconstruct these ideas that we have in our community. I come from a really strong line of feminism, and it's very prominent in my religion. Even in Sikh, there were a lot of female warriors. I'm actually named after one, Bibi Harsharan Kaur. She was like one of the last fighters in a battle. So yeah, we had women that were fighting on the forefront, but a lot of their history has been replaced or not passed down, and so there's a great revival to bring that back to the surface.
We are now many generations on this land. Since our first forefathers, whose hands carved the land, we have now carved out a new future on these shores. We are Sikh, but we are Kiwi too.
My daughter's name is Isha Singh, and this is her birthday actually. So she's 19. Wow. She just finished her first year in a degree in radiation therapy with the University of Otago. Not many migrant communities into those courses yet. She's going to be only second Punjabi and precisely first Sikh girl in Aotearoa.
I'm very hopeful about the new generation. This is their country. They are here to live. They don't have language barriers. They're born and brought up here. They got their education from here. So this is their home country now.
Who's that?
That. You have a guess. Though we had been in this country for so long, but my grandchild, he's the first New Zealand born. And he's the 5th generation. So now all my grandchildren were born here. I think all of them have been back to India at least 2 or 3 times.
Mama, I want gulab jamun.
Yeah, sure, help yourself. Granddad said, if you link people with anywhere at a young age, it stays with you. So these young kids still want to go back to the Punjab, but at the same time, New Zealand also is the future now for our children. And I think the environment in which they are growing up, a multicultural, I think is very empowering both for New Zealand and for these young kids who are going to be the new New Zealanders.
For 130 years, we have become part of this land, and this land has become part of us.
ਨਾਨਕ ਬਿਨ ਸਤਿਗੁਰ ਸੇਵੇ ਮੋਖ ਨ ਪਾਏ ਪੌੜੀ ਸਤਿਗੁਰ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਧਿਆਇਆ ਸੇਕੜ ਸਵਾਈ ਸਤਿਗੁਰ ਜੀ ਨੇ
As the cities and towns have risen from the soil our ancestors helped to cultivate, our connection to this place has also grown.
Good to see you. ਬਹੁਤ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਾ.
We have made our home here, grown our families here, and stand on the shoulders of giants who have gone before us.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.